Hey everyone, I thought that I would come on today and do a video about my experiences with the birth of my two sons, Jason and Jonah. I have a very unique story and I thought that I'd share. I'm not sure how much of this I'm going to include, and if I include a lot of details, this might end up being more than one video. Otherwise, it might get kind of long. But anyway, when we first thought about starting a family, we had trouble conceiving, and eventually, after a while, after seeing a fertility specialist and you know, trying that way for a while, we decided to stop pursuing that and start pursuing adoption. It was something that I kind of always considered doing, and after I had brought it up to my husband, he became interested and open to the adoption experience too. And so we explored agencies. That's a whole nother video, is when you want to start adopting, where should you start? It can be very overwhelming when you're first considering adoption, what agency to go through, what sort of adoption, whether it be international or domestic, whether it's open, semi-open, or closed. There are so many different things to consider. And basically, after we nailed down what agency we wanted to go through, we had to go through an application process. And the agency that we decided to go through was rather small, and they did have a sort of intense application process, and they only picked couples to enter their agency every 6 months. And so when we applied, they weren't going to be picking for another like 5 months, I think it was. So we had to apply and then wait to see if we would even be accepted by this agency. And so it was definitely one of those hurry up and wait sort of situations. And that's definitely how adoption is hurry up and wait during each process. So anyway, I still remember it. I was at work. I was always at work during these pivotal points of the adoption process, but I was at work. I worked at a boutique as a stylist, and I had just opened up the boutique and I was ready to help out my first client, and my cell phone buzzed, but I couldn't answer it because I was with a client. And so I did look down at it and saw that it was our social worker. And so I hadn't found out whether or not we had been accepted into the program. I was hoping that we had been, but wasn't sure. And so when I saw that, I was like really kind of, you know, my heart started racing and I got anxious and excited. And so when I was done with the client, I called them back and found out that we had been accepted into the program. The next steps that we had to take were we had to go through training. And during that summer, there were several sessions that we had to attend learning about adoption and learning about open adoption and domestic adoption, which were the ones that we were going to go through. There are a lot of misconceptions about open adoption, although nowadays it's becoming much more understood. Basically, psychology shows that it is better for the child mentally to know where they came from, and for it not to be a mystery. And that's basically what open adoption means. It doesn't mean that you're sharing custody of the child with their birth mother. It means that the child knows who the birth mother is and knows all of his medical information, and also knows about, you know, what his birth mother's doing. And, you know, depending on your relationship with the birth mother and what you want, what she wants, it can go from there. For us, you'll hear more about what it is for us when I get further into the story. Like I said, this is a very long story. So after we got done with our training, we received a certificate, and then we had to go through the home study process. And that basically, having the home study completed and us being certified, made us foster parents. And so we had to prepare our home. There's a bunch of state regulations that we have to abide by in our home. We had to make sure that it was, you know, ready for a child, but then also there was a bunch of I guess the way I could describe it is it's a lot like a daycare. It has to have certain things that are legitimate in order for us to become foster parents. And so we had our home study. I remember being super nervous about the home study, but it ended up being so, you know, low key, and the social worker was very, very nice, and we felt very comfortable with her. And as soon as that was done, it was like we had a little celebration. I remembered we went to a neighboring city and just kind of like chilled out and just relaxed because the home study was over, and it was a huge relief. And then the waiting process began. We had to assemble a portfolio during that summer. This is the summer of 2011. We had to assemble a portfolio all about our lives. What my husband did, what I did, what our beliefs were, how we viewed the adoption process, and just everything. It had to basically be a photo album or book about our lives. And so we submitted that to the agency, and then we were in the books for birth mothers to start looking at. And the way our agency worked was that a birth mother would look at several profiles and then pick a book that she liked, her favorite couple, and then look at their book and see if they might jive with what she's looking for. And whenever you were looked at and your binder got chosen to be looked at, you got notified. And so within this waiting process, we got notified right away. I think within like a month and a half, we were notified that there was a girl that was going to be looking at our binder. And since that was the first time that I had experienced that, I got my hopes up really, really high. And I had expectations. I thought maybe this is the one. I feel like it might be the one. Oh my goodness, I'm gonna be a mother. I was so excited. But what I soon learned, that wasn't the one. And what I soon learned was that there were going to be a lot of birth mothers who were going to look at our portfolio. That did not mean that they were going to choose us. And so that happened many times before the one occurred. And it took, I think it was this, it's all sort of fuzzy in my head, but it took about a year and a half for us to get chosen by the birth mother that we eventually went with. And what happened was I became very accepting of the fact that we didn't have kids. Everyone around me was starting to have kids or had had kids already. We didn't. I started to become very career driven, and I began to accept that. And the stress was honestly sort of lifted as soon as I wasn't expecting to be picked. I decided that I was just going to put it in God's hands, and just whatever happened, happened, and what was meant to be was meant to be. And so I was not waiting by my phone. I was not like I was at first. I was not anxious or wondering, when is this going to happen? Because I definitely had a battle. Like the first, I would say 6 months of being in the books, it was really emotionally difficult for me. I was wondering, why aren't we being picked? Why aren't we getting more calls? Or like, why isn't the one coming to us? You know, questioning God, why? But then I realized pretty soon that when the right one comes along, she comes along. And those other ones were not the right ones. And so I got the opportunity to really invest myself more in my career. And for that, I'm very thankful, because I developed what I would consider a family at work. And I developed a job and a career that I will never forget. And it's changed me for the better. And so my husband also has a career, and he was focused on that. And we had a lot of fun together, just as a single couple with no kids. And so all of a sudden, our lives just changed dramatically. One day, I went to, my brother is a professional runner, and he ran an ultra marathon. And me and my family, my parents, my sister, my grandma, my husband, we were all going to watch him run this ultra marathon. And normally I have tons of energy, especially in the morning. I'm just that kind of annoying person where I'm a morning person, or I was. Now that I've had 2 kids, I wouldn't say that for sure. But I was, you know, very energetic, and I felt so tired. I was just exhausted. And I remember for that past week, my boobs had hurt so badly. And I honestly thought maybe I had breast cancer. I seriously was considering going into the doctor for it, because I was very nervous about it. And I told my mom, I'm like, I am just so tired today. And my breasts have been hurting so badly. I think that I might need to go and have, like, you know, mammogram or something. I'm very concerned. And she's like, Rach, I don't know. Before you do that, you should take a pregnancy test. And, you know, me having been through thinking I was pregnant before in the past and not being pregnant, I was like, Mom, no, that's totally not my lot in life. I'm not pregnant. But you know, the more that the day wore on and I was just so exhausted, I was getting headaches, and the more I thought maybe I should take a pregnancy test before I go into the doctor. And, you know, they're probably going to ask me right away anyway if I've taken one, so I might as well just take one. It'll show negative, and then I can tell them, no, for sure, not pregnant. So I bought the pregnancy test, really expecting it to be negative. Well, I woke up that next morning, like at 3 a.m., I couldn't sleep, and I'm like, well, I might as well do this thing. I take the pregnancy test, and it's positive. And I was like, okay, that's got to be a mistake, you know? I'm going through the adoption process. I didn't think this was going to happen for me. This has to be wrong. So I took it again, another positive, and it was not a questionable positive. It was like, bam, that thing was positive. And I was like, okay. So by this time it was around 4, and I was like, do I wake up my husband? I'm like, okay, I gotta wake him up. And I go up there, I'm like, you are not going to believe this. I'm like, I think I'm pregnant. And so, of course, me being me, I needed a doctor to confirm this, because this could be wrong. This home pregnancy test, you know, this could definitely be wrong in my mind. And so I called my doctor right away, and I'm like, look, here's the deal. I really need to have blood tests done ASAP, because I'm going through the adoption process, and I was kind of under the impression that I wasn't going to be getting pregnant, and I think I might be pregnant. And so they knew, okay, this chica needs to be, you know, needs to get in here ASAP. And so they got me in on Monday, and they gave me my results the next day, because they knew I was like totally spazzing out about this. And they said, yes, you know, that I got that call. I'll never forget it. My husband was at work. I didn't go to work that day, but you better believe I was waiting by my phone watching that thing. And I got the phone call that afternoon, and she's like, congratulations, you are pregnant. It looks like you're about 3 weeks pregnant. And, at the 6-week mark, we're going to have you come in, and we'll know a little bit more. We'll try to find a heartbeat, but yeah, you're pregnant. And I just was floored, completely floored. I didn't know how to proceed. I mean, I called my husband, and we didn't know how to proceed. We're like, our hearts were still with the adoption process. We fully believed that that was a journey that we were supposed to take, yet now I was pregnant. And so we were thinking, you know what, we'll call the social worker, and what we'll probably end up doing, what she's probably going to recommend, is that we put the adoption on hold and proceed after I have this baby. Well, that was a bit of a whirlwind of a week, and we had not had the opportunity to call our social worker. On Thursday of that week, I went into work, and our boutique was open later on Thursday evenings, and I was helping the last client in the evening. I remember very clearly, she was like a ballroom dancer, and I was helping her pick out a dress for this competition she was going to be in. And I was finishing up with her, and I heard my phone buzz. I'm like, who would be contacting me now? And I was like, and when I looked at it, I saw it was the social worker, and I was like, oh, I didn't call the social worker to tell her I'm pregnant, and I'm pretty sure Mike didn't either. And so I was like, and then I can't remember how this went. Oh, I do remember how this went. I did not call her back. I wasn't able to, because I was like closing down the boutique. I was closing down this sale with this ballroom dancer, and I got a text from my husband, Mike, and he's like, we've been picked by a birth mother. And I was just like, no way. You know, how does this happen? And so I get home, and I remember Mike and I seriously debating, do we tell them I'm pregnant? Because I'm only 3 weeks pregnant. I mean, maybe we could just go through this, you know, because apparently the birth mother was pretty far along. We found that she was due in October. And it was, at that time, it was the end of August, I believe. And so we were like, no, we got to be honest. You know, we didn't entertain the thought of fooling anyone for very long. We're like, no, we got to be honest. We got to tell them I'm pregnant, and we'll see. I mean, this birth mother, we thought, will probably want to pick a different couple. now that we know we can get pregnant, she's probably gonna wanna pick a couple that for sure can't get pregnant. But if by some chance she would still want us, you know, we discussed, would we go through with this? And we agreed, yes, we would, because this is such a huge coincidence. It just can't be, you know, it can't just be a coincidence. It must be the path that we are meant to lead if this all goes through. And the other thing that we were thinking is maybe our social worker will not allow us to go through with this because maybe she'll think it's too much. A girl that's pregnant, also adopting at the same time, maybe that's too much. So when we ran this by our social worker said, no, you know, I think you guys have it together. I think that you could do this, but I will have to run it by the birth mother and see if that's an issue for her, if that would make her change her mind. Whew. And so we had to wait, and it took a few days for us to hear back, and we wondered, we're like, honestly, we kind of thought that the birth mother would be like, no, she's gonna pick somebody else. But surprisingly, that weekend we heard from our social worker that the birth mother really liked our profile, and she was actually even more interested in us now that I was pregnant, because she had siblings and she wanted her future baby to have a sibling as well. And so she was excited about that and still wanted to meet us and still wanted to try to go through with picking us to be her baby's parents. And so that is, I think, where I'm going to end for part one, because this story is just crazy. I'm going to end there where I'm 3 weeks along, and we are also expecting through the birth mother of our first baby, and she is due in October. I am due in May. So as you can tell, we are going to have babies that are very close in age. They're not twins, but they're going to be very close in age. And yeah, so it's a crazy time and a very exciting time in my life. I just, you know, I want to share this story not only because I want to remember it very clearly in my head, and this all happened about 3 years ago, but I also want to share my story in case any of you are going through trying to get pregnant, fertility issues, or the adoption process, because I have experience with all of the above. You know, I'm pretty well-rounded in both experiences. And so I think it's a bit of a rarity to have both of those experiences. And so I want to share, and I want to help anyone who might be going through something similar or any of these things. So that's part one. I'm going to go on with part two later.